Hi, I'm Allie. Join me in creating this fun square stitch keyhole bracelet. Make sure you watch the whole way because we're going to make a toggle bar and loop out of the keyholes as well. Remember, if you do need any supplies, go ahead and look below the video. In the description, there'll be a link to our site. That'll give you all the details as far as the colors that I use, the quantities that you need, and also some other helpful videos that will go along with this. Gather up your materials and let's get started. So to start our keyhole bracelet, we are going to be working with some 8OC beads, some 15Os, and we're doing square stitch. You can choose to put something in the middle or not. I'm going to be using disco balls, and I'm using a collection of brightly colored 8OC beads to create this look. Go ahead and take some size 6 or size 8 dragon thread and put a size 10 or 11 needle on there and leave yourself a bit of a tail after the stop bead. So the stop bead I'm going to sew through once, and then I'm going to sew through twice. The reason that I'm letting that tail is because I still need to go in and do my toggle for the end of the bracelet. We are doing square stitch, and we are doing a patterned square stitch. We're going to begin with a row of 9 beads in our silver color. I'm using Miyuki brand for this, but you can use Toho, Miyuki, it's up to you. We're going to pick up 9 of our seed beads, and I want you to start thinking of them as groups of 3. So we have 9 beads, but really we have 3 groups of 3 that we're going to let fall down next to that stop bead. From here, anytime we make a turn or we're on the outside, we're going to use a 15 seed bead just to decorate a little bit along that side and hide some of our thread. From here, we are going to create a framed look. We're going to create a row of color, and then we're going to create an inner box to hold our bead. To do so, I'm letting that 15 hang out right after my group of 9 seed beads. And then I'm going to start on my first color, which is this beautiful sage color, translucent sage. I'm going to add 3 beads because I'm doing 3 bead for a square stitch. So I'm doing 3 beads wide. You're adding your next 3 colors, and you're going to take your thread and needle back through the last 3 beads, starting towards the stop bead and sewing towards the 15 So your needle and thread are going from there all the way down and coming out. I want to make sure that it's not going through that 15 seed bead. Again, all that's going to do is decorate the end of the piece. Give a nice tight pull, and you can see the start of the square stitch. See how it's a little bit rounded out? It's going to flatten out and lay nicely against one another as we progress. You're going to skip over that 15, and you're going to sew back through the 3 beads that you just added, going towards that stop bead. So it's basically a round in a circle that we're doing with that square stitch. And you always want to, after each stitch, give a nice tight pull on your thread. I think square stitch is one of the most important threads to do that on, or one of the most important stitches to do that on. Next, we're going to do another set of 3 beads. We're going to count up 3 beads, 1, 2, 3 from that starter silver row. So we're going to go through bead number 3, 4, and 5, or sorry, 4, 5, and 6, sewing down this time, again, away from the stop bead, down towards the project. What this is going to do once again is let those 3 beads sit on the side. We're going to take that thread then and sew back through the 3 beads that we just added. So you're circling around, getting it nice and in that stitch. From here, we're going to do 3 drop again. So we're doing 1, 2, and 3 beads. And we're going to start at that stop bead now, going through beads 1, 2, and 3. After you go through that silver row, beads 1, 2, and 3, you're going to once again sew through the beads that you just added, going through those 3 beautiful green beads. Bring your thread and needle out, and you just completed 1 row of square stitch. Now I like to sew away from me, but for this point of purpose, I'm going to keep going so that way you're holding the piece the exact same way. But usually I would flip it for my piece, but I'm going to hold it so that way you can see as you come back down. As we come back down the next row here, we're going to start adding in our silver and our green. We're on the outer edge, so we're going to add 1 of our 15Os. Then we're going to add 2 of our greens, followed by 1 of our silver 8O seed beads. Just like we've been doing, you're going to sew away from that last starter line. I'm going to sew through beads 1, 2, sorry, 3, 2, and 1 of that line of green. So you're counting back 3 beads, you're circling those beads around, that 15-0 just hangs off on the side, and then we're going to sew back down through the 3 beads that we just added. If you need help with square stitch, we also have below the video in the description a link to get to our website to watch this video and to get the supplies. There also are some helpful videos that will help, like flat square stitch, if you need to learn a little bit more. In the middle here, to get this nice squared section, we're going to do 3 of our silver beads in a row. Count down 3 beads, 1, 2, 3. You're going to sew up those 3 beads, so you're going through 6, 5, and 4 of the previous row. Folding the thread kind of back around, give a nice tight pull, and sew back through the 3 you just added. Our last rotation is going to be 1 silver because we're trying to get that box, so it's a patterned square stitch, 2 greens, and I'm going to be going into the end, so I want to add one of those 15s to decorate. Sew in through beads 9, 8, 7 from the previous row, and then once again through those 3 beads that you just added. Again, important for square stitch, give a nice tight pull to tighten up that 3rd row. So you can see now you have 3 rows of your square stitch, and we're going to continue on with rows 4, 5, and 6. These middle rows here are going to have beads that are part of them. We're going to add the beads, but we're not going to square stitch it on. We're going to create an opening and come back and add the beads. So we're going to do row number 4, row number 5, row number 6, and row number 7. We're going to come back and kind of create and link them together. To start out here, I'm on the side. I'm going to add a 15. And then once again, 2 of our green beads, 1 of our silver. If we're using purple, 2 purple, 1 silver. I'm going to count 3 beads, and I'm going to go through beads 3, 2, 1, going backwards on the design to lay those against it. Once again, so back up through the 3 beads that you just added. And now we're going to do a single row of that square stitch. We're going to add a silver because we're going to be coming back down the other way, kind of lay your thread around and you can see which order you need. 2 of our greens and then 1 of our silvers. So back up through those last 3 beads that you just added, pulling that thread around in a circle, getting those to lay down and coming back down the beads that you just added. That's going to get us rows number 4 and row number 5. We're going to do row number 6 in the same fashion, and then we're going to continue row number 6. So we want to do 2 greens after our 15 and a silver. We're going to square stitch that together, going back through the beads that our thread is currently coming out of, circling around, skipping over that 15, which is used just to decorate the edge, back through the 3 beads that we just put on, right in a line, and then once again, giving a nice tight pull. The advantage to square stitch is that you are going to get a loom look without having to do the loom. Now I'm going to continue with this square stitch, and it's going to seem a little bit funky as we progress. Basically, rows 4 and 5 have a gap in the middle. Row 6 is going to be a completed row. We're going to pick up 3 of our silver beads, 1, 2, 3, and those are going to be the next grouping of 3 because that's going to help to close off that square. After that, we need 1 silver, and we're going to do 2 greens to complete our row. When you're looking at this then, if you lay it down, you can look at it and you say, okay, I've got my square ready to go. How am I going to connect it to the sides? We're going to add a 15 and we're going to square stitch backwards now. We're going to square stitch keeping that opening by adding 2 greens and a silver bead. We're going to sew back up through the silver and the 2 greens that were last in this row that we just added. Give a nice tight pull. Just like we've been doing, but this time we're working backwards in the design. We're going to sew through the 3 beads that our thread just added on. Give a nice tight pull. Make sure you don't see any of that extra thread. That's why I said in square stitch, it's always important to give a nice tight pull on the thread, not the needle. From here, we're going to mimic it. So we're going back around one more time. We're adding a silver and then 2 greens. And then once again, going to be on the outer side, so we're adding a 15-0. We're coming into the top here. If you want, you can bend it out to the side. That makes it a little bit easier to work with. Sew into the opposite side of the beads that your thread is currently coming out of. They get folded down. You're going to sew back up through those beads that you just added. And when you're coming out the top of that row, you're going to fold the project towards each other. Grab a 15, and then you're going to connect row number 3 at the top to your 4th row. Adding a 15, sewing down through the 3 beads that are there, 2 greens and a silver, bringing your needle out, and then once again, sewing back up through that short top 4th row. Now here we are with our open square. We're ready to go for our first little component, and we are going to add in our round. If you don't want to add in a round bead and you want to keep it open, I'll do a video on those. You can simply continue the stitch by zigzagging back and forth. What we're going to do is coming out of the top of row number 4 at the top, we're going to sew down through row number 5. Coming out row number 5, add your 6mm bead. You can add a 6mm round. You can add a 6mm bicone like I'm doing here that has a 15-0 on either side or not, up to you. And once you add that 6mm bead, I want you to sew down then through the bottom of row number 5. Once that's in there, I want you to sew up through the bottom row number 4. Once you're coming out that row number 4, take your needle and thread through that disco ball 6mm and then sew up through the top of row number 4. Once you're up through the top of that row number 4, I want you to sew down through row number 5 to kind of straighten this out, down through the disco ball, down through the bottom of row number 5, which is going to be that short grouping of 3 beads. And then we're going to go all the way up through row number 6. Once we get to the top of row number 6, going through all 9 beads there, we are going to add row number 7. Row number 7 is just going to be a standard green row. 115, 3 greens, back into those last 3 beads on the row number 6, circling them around, going back through the 3 we just added, and continuing on with your row of green. After you have your row of green, 3 more beads added, back up through the 3. We're going to do a row of silver, and then we progress into a new color. You can stay the same color if you want to. You can do a new color. And here at the bottom, after I do those 3 beads, I need to add a silver. 15, so it's decorating the end, going up through those 3 beads, folding it kind of over and down. My next row is going to be a row of all silver, adding on my 15-0, then going in and adding my first 3 beads here, coming down through the last 3, tightening it up, going through then the top, and progressing on. As you do this square stitch, you can always go back in this video and rewind so you can see how to do that opening one more time with a different color. All I'm going to do now is finish up the silver row, pick another color, and start another row with the exact same format over and over again, adding together these different colors. If you don't want to use the 15-0s, you don't have to. You can keep those 15-0s off the edge, and you can even just do a squared with a single row. You can keep that open, you can close it up with different beads, and you can have fun creating all of these little different patchwork keyhole colors. As you get to the end of your design, you're going to want to leave your last box open. Now my bracelet is getting a little bit big. I still have to make my toggle bar coming back, and thanks to Evelyn, one of our Twitch viewers and Facebook viewers, for that idea. I'm going to keep this keyhole open, and we're going to create a toggle bar based on square stitch coming off the starter side. That's why we left thread there. That's going to go through this last loop. Now I cut mine a little bit short, so I didn't do my last row of blue because my bracelet was starting to get a little bit long. But I want to show, I have a small wrist though, so you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 approximately of your color variations in this match. You can do all different colors, you can do the same, kind of up to you. But I wanted to show how I was then going to sew back into the design and basically get rid of my thread. Now I got to the end here and I had to add thread. So I'm going to take my opportunity here and tie off the thread ends with one of the threads that I had started here. And then I'm also going to get ready to burn those thread ends as I get back, but I'm going to sew back through the design a little bit. What this is going to help do is stiffen up that last box, which again, my toggle bar will be going through. So I'm going to take the opportunity to go back through this once, twice, and then knot it again. So I'm going back and forth, up and down through this piece a couple times because I want it to be fairly stiff for this section of the keyhole. I'm going up and down, and I want to get there until it gets really tight that I'm having trouble, honestly, getting thread through. So kind of wiggling it across there, making sure that it's through. And then once I feel like it's nice and stable, I'll go ahead and tie another knot between the threads of the beads. Come back up here, getting a little tight here. Going to go back into this keyhole. And again, the reason that I'm doing this is because this is going to be your clasp. You can obviously attach another clasp and fill this with the crystal, but this way it has lots of threads going through it and lots of opportunity for stability. You'll be able to feel how stiff this last one is. And again, I'm using size 6 dragon thread for this. You could use size 8, up to you. I'm going to go one more time through my end here just to stiffen it up and then tie off my thread. Once I tie off the thread, then what I'm going to do is flip back over, put my needle and thread, or my needle on my starter thread here, which I left extra for in order to do my square stitch, because we're going to get ready to do our toggle bar that's going to go into that keyhole loop that we just created. Once you have your loop done on the one side, it's time to do your toggle bar on the other side. I've taken my stop bead off and I'm coming out between beads number 4 and 5, or sorry, 5 and 6 in the rows of that square stitch on the beginner side. And what I'm going to do is just one single bead for a little bit and do 5 rows of square stitch. One bead goes on, and this is actually ladder stitch when it's one bead, and you go back through that single bead. Once you're out of that single bead, grab another one, go into the opposite side, back through that single bead. And what this is going to do is line them up one on top of the other. And again, we're going to do this 4 times. Now I'm going to need to add more thread as I go and do this, but I'm adding a bead, sewing back through the bead my thread is coming out of, going back through the bead that I just added. And then I'm going to get ready to create a toggle bar. So I'm going into that bead, and 4 beads wide, 4 beads tall are going to be a nice start to this, because what that's going to do is get me ready for my toggle bar to be able to fit into and kind of behind here that they'll line up exactly. And I'm going to use my purple beads to create my toggle bar. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more thread in here, and then I'm going to get ready with some square stitch to create my toggle bar to fit into my keyhole. After 4 individual beads in that watermelon color, I'm going to grab the purple and I put 1 bead on of that purple. We're going to create a bar for our toggle, and I want you to add 3 beads onto your thread and needle. Let them drop next to that bead that sits in the middle. From here, I want you to add 7 beads on. And once you have those 7 beads on, go ahead and let them lay down next to the other beads in line. I need to get a couple more out here to do my bar. And now what I want you to do is put on another 3 beads after those 7. And there's a reason that I'm talking to them in 7s and 3s. What we're going to do is we're going to sew back into, after we have that group of 3, then a 7, then a 3. We're going to sew back into that purple bead that our thread is currently coming out of. And it's going to seem like it makes a loop. Obviously, we want a toggle bar and not a loop. We're going to sew back through those 3 beads that were the first 3 beads. And what we're going to do is we are going to make this lay in a line. So we're going to square stitch here those 3 beads after onto the next 3 beads. Going through the next 3 beads, coming back then and going through the 3 that our thread was just coming out of. That once again, just like square stitch looks, brings them into a line. Go back through those 3 that the thread were coming out of. So through the next 3 beads, next 4 beads. And we're going to do the same thing again. Sewing out through the next 4 beads, grab those 4 beads below, which are the 3, and then that middle bead. Fold it over, and you're going to sew again through those 4 beads that your thread just went through. So what you're doing is you're creating 2 rows of that square stitch. We're going to sew back through the whole entire row to get it to line up nice and tight. Going through what is 7 beads, that one in the middle, then we added 3, then we added 7 more, then we added 3 more, and we square stitch all of them together. And now we have 2 rows of our square stitch that's going to start to form our toggle. You can see and play with how big you want that toggle to be, how many rows you want it, and how it's going to sit on the design. I'm going to do 1 more row of that square stitch to get it to fit comfortably, and we're going to round that out into a nice rounded toggle bar loop. So just like we've been doing with the square stitch, we're coming out of our 2nd row here, and we are going to add another 7 beads, 3 first and then 4. 1, 2, 3. So back through those 3 that are coming out. Get those to lay down next to it. Back through those 3. Add 4 more because it's 7 wide. And then back through the 4 underneath. Back out through. Back down through those 4. Once I'm out through those 4, I'm going to round it out. So I'm going to take my thread and needle coming out of row 3, and we're going to sew into row number 1. All the way down through row number 1, excuse me. And then we are going to sew back through row number 3. And this is going to make it into a little triangle. That's going to be your toggle bar. You can see it sitting there nicely. And what we're going to do is we're just going to decorate the ends. So to decorate the ends, I want to use a silver. I'm going to go from number 1 that I'm coming out of into number 2. Just to put basically a little silver cap on the side. It'll just lay right there, kind of in between the triangle. And then again, 1 more. And of course, I need 1 more bead out of my tube to create that little toggle bar. And then once again, go back through one of the other rows. And honestly, it doesn't matter what other row, if you're coming out of 3 or you're going into 1 or you're going into 2, that silver bead will just kind of sit in the middle there. Right, like that. That is going to be our toggle bar that goes into our keyhole. And you're going to turn it to the side, pull that through along with that 8O seed bead that's leading up to it, and see how that toggle bar, thanks Angeline for the idea, is just going to sit right in the middle there. I'm going to reinforce this square stitch, sewing back through and just connecting it a little bit more in the middle between those last 2 rows. And then I'm going to reinforce the thread down that bar in the middle and then tie off the thread along the project. So going in here, I'm going to make sure that I don't have any gaps in my toggle bar. Picking up my bracelet, going in here and saying, okay, there's that gap there. Let's do a little square stitch into 3 beads, linking over to the 3 from row number 1. Because remember, we sewed up through row number 1 and down through row number 3, but we never actually square stitched them together. So it's creating a little bit of an opening. So we're just going to, right there, tighten that together. So up through, bring my thread and needle out wherever. I'm going to tighten this row and pull them together as well. So that square stitch that you're learning can become really, really helpful. And I'm just going to sew down through the 2 beads here in order to link pieces together and rows together. There, my toggle bar is nice and secure. I'm going to go down now and I'm just going to reinforce this whole line. Now I kept this line to a single bead because 1, you don't really see it, but 2, it needs to be thin enough to go into that keyhole with the toggle bar. So you can see I'm running down here. I have some thread and knotted there. I'm going to make sure this is really, really well connected back to the start of this bracelet, going down through an entire row, then coming back up through, popping out about where I need it to go, taking my thread and needle back up here. And even though it's a fair amount of thread that you see, it's that gray, it's going to match with the silver, and these beads go behind the keyhole. If you want to, you can put 15s in between it, but I'm just strengthening that line one more time before I go in and tie off the thread ends to complete this fun keyhole bracelet. So you have your toggle bar here, your toggle loop there, and all your fun colors. When you wear it, it can spin all around, and it's going to look like a continuous design from one to the other, going the whole way around. Again, you can keep it open. Comment below if you did any change up, if you changed any sides. I had a ton of fun creating and working with this bracelet, and I'm even going to be showing you in a later video how to make a cute pair of matching earrings. Thanks so much for joining me, Potomac Beaders, and learning how to do this fun keyhole bracelet. I can't wait to see all of your designs and your pictures of your keyhole bracelets in our Facebook group for beading and jewelry making. As always, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything from us here at Potomac Beads. And if you do need any materials, go ahead and look below the video in the description to get that link to our site. As always, thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next inspirational design.